Well, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. Both my parents were alive. We lived in a mixed neighborhood, a lot of Polish people and a lot of black people and other minorities. It was a learning street, the street that I lived on, because all the parents would take care of all the other parents' children. It was one of these things that if you did something wrong, you didn't have to worry about telling your mom or your dad. They'd take care of it right there. In a neighborhood like that, everyone goes to school. You're doing all the things you're supposed to. I played football, basketball, track, and all the others. And the thing that was motivating was seeing other kids do even better, especially those that were older than you. You could see them out there playing, scrimmaging, training on what they did. But at the same time, on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, you go by the library. They were all there studying. So their parents would go with them sometimes. Sometimes they would just be on their own. But the whole thing was, they knew what they had to do, and they did it. My uncle, whom I was named after, had a friend that was a professor at Southern University. And at the time when I got in that little trouble, the judge gave me a ultimatum: find a place to go, or we'll find a place for you to go. I studied political science and everything else that had a book cover on it. You know, it wasn't anything that I was looking to do this, that, or the other. The whole thing from my point of view was to try to do as much as I could, as many times as I could. And so the whole thing was, in a neighborhood like that where everyone goes even to the movies, they would have books. And so the kids would take books there between features. And they'd turn on the lights and then you could just read or do whatever you were doing. But the whole thing was to get the knowledge, or at least the basics, so that I could do better if I could go further. Well, when I got to Southern University, the professor, and I'm trying to think of his name, told me that I was going to be there for a while and to see how we could do. He told me about the different things were available, and he helped me initially set up my curriculum. And from there, I had a chance to take ROTC or not take ROTC. I decided to take it. The military called me and told me that I was going to be going into training. And after I finished the training, if I did well, then I perhaps could be a second lieutenant. Special Forces came a little bit later when President Kennedy decided that he was going to activate a unit that nobody had talked about, and that was Special Forces. And so he was the main reason that we have Special Forces. The other thing that is really unique about that, around his grave at in Arlington, there is a fire that burns consistently, and it's because, and it was with Special Forces that he started that, so that fire is always lit in his name. I got my first assignment, which was Fort Dix, New Jersey. Once I got there, they were about to close down that facility, and so I volunteered for Korea. When I got to Korea, it was right at the same time President Kennedy decided he was going to activate Special Forces. I waited for about 6 months while I was there. I applied for Special Forces to enter Special Forces. I was accepted, not to go in right away. I finished my ILBC course. I went to the 1st Cav Division in Korea. Once I got there, my orders came to report to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Once I did that, I was accepted. I had to go through the Q course. The Q course is the qualification course. And only about 3%, I'm told, to get through that particular course. So I was one of the ones that was accepted. I passed the course. And from there, before I could even go any further, I had to go to airborne school. I had to get qualified as an airborne. And after I finished that, I was finishing the airborne course. I was going back to my barracks, and the sergeant major came out and walked by me and stopped and said, "We just had someone who was going to Ranger School, had to drop out. You think you might be interested in that?" I said, "Yes, sir." So I went from airborne to Ranger, and once I was qualified in both of those, I was assigned to the 5th Special Force, initially the 7th Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. Later on, when the war started, I had my first tour. I think I was 18 years old, it might have been 17, whatever it was. My first tour in Vietnam was in 1963. After that first tour I had in 1963 with Special Forces in Vietnam, I went back to my main group, and then I was transferred out from there to Okinawa. Okinawa had the 1st Special Forces Group, and they were going in and out of Vietnam all the time. I mean, it was one of the few groups that had a short trip from Okinawa to Vietnam, and I was assigned there, and that's how that happened. Initially, we were harassed by the Viet Cong. They would fire into our camp, a few mortars and things they would fire into our camp, until we were strong enough and had trained our soldiers enough that we were able to counter those by going out and patrolling and making sure that our village, the place that we were, was safe and secure. So we did that, and then we started patrolling. Later on, there were all kinds of scrimmages and things that we were in firefights with. We had the district chief that we had to report to. We had General Westmoreland, who was the overall commander in Vietnam. So all those lines of commands you had to be able to respond to. In fact, we had a reputation of being able to do the things that he thought were really important. He didn't differentiate in any ways in terms of difference between special forces and regular troops. So both the divisions that they had there were given missions by General Westmoreland and his staff as they were. We were given our mission. We had our own chain of command. But we were fighting some of the best troops that North Vietnam could put on the field, and we went to battle with them. They would twice they actually came into our area, and we had a small firefight. And then we decided, through Westmoreland, that we needed to do more engaging the enemy. And so it was then that we came up with plans. We had surveillance out and just how we were going to fight the Viet Cong. We were in a firefight with the battalion, one of the trained battalions from North Vietnam. And once we had gotten all the information, we had planes that were taking pictures and letting us know where they were, and some other information that was really interesting. We were interested in being able to make a war plan or a plan to go in and fight them. So Wall was our team sergeant, by the way, a very good fighter. And when we got into this big fight, Wall one of the people that was not in the advanced group, but he was in one of the people that we had that was out scouting the people that we were fighting, and he happened to be in a firefight that I was in, and he got shot 5 times. He was in a buffalo rub, and the Snyder, the only thing he could see or shoot was his leg, and he put 5 rounds in his leg. And so we later on we evacuated him. My role was to make sure, if I could, to get him out of the situation he was in, but he was not the only one. In that firefight, Brown, who was one of our medics, he got a bullet through the head, and Reinberg, another one of our soldiers, we had to send. I had them to send Reinberg in. Reinberg brought us ammunition because we were getting very low, and so once he landed on the helicopter, went down the hill to where we were, and put down the 2 boxes of ammunition. He got up and he got 2 rounds right through his chest and fell into my arms, and we later got him out. At that time, Wall was still in the fight, but he was sort of bogged down because he was in this buffalo robe and he could rub, and he couldn't move very well. And the only thing we were trying to do then was to get him out of there. But then he had 2 people that were also wounded: Wall, Reinberg, and Brown. Brown was the young Spec 4 who had been shot in the head. And so the next thing, as the battle progressed, we got air support, we got naval gunfire, we got other, I'm trying to think, a little fire from the Marines, artillery fire, but we just fought them mainly by ourselves. We were our own air controller initially. We had a person, and his name was Atis, who had, while we were at Okinawa, had gone to school they had Navy ships in Okinawa. So we were able to get a couple of slots that our guys could be trained by the Navy people who were in the ships that were in the South China Sea. So that's how we worked that. We also had Air Force people that were stationed at Kadena in Okinawa, and they were from the 105 Thunderbirds.
Right.
So we had all that going for us, and plus we could call in artillery fighter if it was available. We could get it from some of the units, American units who were there. That wasn't always the case because they had their own problems in terms of taking care of their own troops. They were coming at us in droves. There were 2 occasions when we heard the bugles and we knew that we were going to have a battle on our hands.
How many, when you say droves?
I would say
Dozens?
Oh no, maybe 30 or 40 in a line,
Right.
coming at you. They also had snipers and other people. They were doing fire and maneuver and everything else, throwing grenades.
Were you hit before you got to Billy Wall?
Oh yeah, I was hit twice before that. My hand right here, my fingers were shot off,
Right.
and all that.
Where were you hit, other than your finger?
My stomach. I've got a buffalo. I have a stomach tear where, having been in a fight and picking up ammunition.
Can we see your hand again?
There's a buffalo, a tear right there.
Wow.
It's been there for 30, 40 years. This is one of the hands. Lost some of my teeth, defecated them, and in that battle I was wounded at least twice. First of all, we had to find a way to pick him up. because he had been shot. And remember, he was in sort of a semi-prone position and trying to pick him up so that we could, and I was the only one there. The other 3 Americans had already been wounded, to pick him up so we could get him on the aircraft. We had an aircraft, a dust-off, that's what we called them. And I had called in for a dust-off to take Billy Wall to the hospital. Here's what happened with Billy Wall. First, I had to get him out of that hole he was in. Once you did that, he was winded in so much and so many times that he was on the ground. I turned him over so his butt was on facing the ground. I then took my arms and put them around him with his arms that were just off of my shoulders. I would take us, and I was sitting, and I was laying down. I would then sit up, dig my 2 heels in the ground, and pull them to where my heels were. Then we would do that over and over and over again until we got to a point on the knoll where the helicopter was that I could lift him up, and one of the door gunners came down and helped me put him in the helicopter. Once we got Wall up there and got him on the helicopter, we then, at that time, we had already gotten Brown, who was shot in the head. I had gone out and gotten Brown. Brown was already on the helicopter. So
you put Brown on the helicopter?
I put Brown,
How many
Wall, and Reinberg, all 3. I put all 3 on the helicopter.
At any time?
On different helicopters.
At any time were you told to abandon your post?
Not at that time, but in a different operation, a different fight, I was told to, we'll just leave the soldier there, we'll come in and get him. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And the colonel said, well, you know, this is disobeying the order. And I said, so be it. There would be soldiers out there or whomever that saw me in action would then put me in for a medal or whatever. In fact, the South Vietnam Army put me in for about 5 or 6 medals.
What are some of the medals that you have been awarded, other than the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star, English Service?
Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Soldier's Medal, the Silver Star, recommended, although I don't have it, the DSC. I think I have every medal except the Medal of Honor.
Now, the issue of the award has been outstanding for 57 years.
Right.
Have you ever seen a situation like this where it's been delayed so long?
I haven't been personally involved in any. And I'll tell you what I find particularly offensive. You and I are old dogs, and we remember when the Army and the Navy were very different than they are today. Very different. You can remember a time when enlisted blacks could only serve in the kitchen on mess duty. You were one of the first black naval aviators in history, and you served with everyone who were the initial black naval aviators. The idea that someone could be put in for the Medal of Honor by their battalion commander and somehow that package goes missing is offensive. The fact that the Army could figure that out in 1969 and said, resubmit the package for the Medal of Honor, and that package went missing, offends me to the core. I did not risk my life for this country to have my country treat people like you or Paris Davis in that fashion. I just simply didn't do it, and I wouldn't do it. And my son didn't die for that value. And that's wrong. And it's I can tell you that if I were the Secretary of Defense, that friggin' package would be signed before this camera cools from its heat. If I were the Secretary of the Army, I would be beating on the Secretary of Defense's door saying, you need to sign that friggin' package. And if I were the Secretary of Defense and I signed it, I'd be inviting myself over to dinner with the president. I'd say, Mr. President, you need to do the right thing and you need to do it right now. It's we all need heroes. We all need people who we can play like we're like. That's what I did. That's when I was going through boot camp. I was reading Leon Uris's book called Battle Cry that talked about his time in the Pacific in combat with the Marine Corps. And Life magazine came out with a cover of a Marine Corps crew chief and door gunner from a Marine squadron in Vietnam. And I said, that's what I want to do. And we need people like you, and we need people like Paris Davis. So all of our children, not just our little rich white kids, all of our children can look up and say, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Neil Thorne is a researcher, and he volunteers his time to assist veterans in recovering medals that they have earned that have not been awarded. Neil, how did you get involved in the Paris Davis case?
In about 2014, a friend of mine and former SOCOM commander, Major General Eldon Bargewell, referred me to Ranger and Pathfinder legend Tommy Shook, who I met at a Distinguished Service Cross ceremony in Florida. Now, Tommy had been working with Colonel Davis's case himself for quite some time to get it moving.
Now, since 2009, you've been involved as a researcher. How many cases have you had, and how much success have you had with those cases?
Since about 2009, myself and other people doing this work, and this work takes teams, we've recovered somewhere between 50 and 70 lost, missing, or downgraded medals and awards, including Gary Michael Rose's 2017 Medal of Honor. Now, we've also recovered numerous Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Air Medals, Purple Hearts, even Army Achievement Medals, and other lost and missing Valor and Service Awards, along with correcting the records. We've also written 2 pieces of passing time limit waiver legislation and ensured that proper ceremonies for many of these decorations and awards were conducted.
Have you ever had a case that has been outstanding for 57 years since
No.
the initial recommendation was made?
No, this is unheard of. Even in some of the extreme cases, this is way beyond anything I have dealt with.
Why do you think it twice the package has been lost? And particularly when you look at all of the medals and decorations that Captain Major Colonel Davis has been awarded.
I really think that this is a case of racism. I think that it was submitted to Special Forces headquarters at Nha Trang. I not only think that, I know that. We have the testimony of his commander, Major Billy Cole. We have it over and over again. We have Billy Cole being interviewed by the famous reporter Charlie Black shortly after the action, mentioning that he was putting him in for the Medal of Honor. We have the 1969 official testimony of Billy Cole stating that he submitted it to Nha Trang, but then it vanished. It should have gone to Saigon. Now, at that time, it never made it there, and it never made it beyond. So all indications were it made it to Nha Trang, Special Forces headquarters, and was either trashed or unacted upon and later destroyed.
Is there anybody in the chain of command involved in a process that has stopped this, given that the Secretary of the Army ostensibly has signed off twice? 2 SEC arms have signed off. Is there any person you can identify?
Yeah, we believe it to be one individual person within the sub office of the Office of the Secretary of Defense.
What is his name?
Doug Johnson.
Why is Doug Johnson so obstinate? Why is he trying to overrule the legal and the, leadership of the Army?
We're not really sure. The best I can think of it is plain petty bureaucracy. I said no once, which was the first time we made it to OSD. So I'm going to say no again, and I'm going to continue to say no. All of the concerns from the original trip to the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the military's Personnel and Policy Office have been addressed by the United States Army. We have two secretaries of the Army, Esper and Wormuth, that have both endorsed this packet. We have the Army Chief of Staff McConville, who's endorsed this packet, and yet it's being stopped by an individual within the military personnel and policy section, never getting to the Secretary of Defense himself, and we doubt he's even aware of it.
What kind of response have you received from members of the Senate from the Commonwealth of Virginia?
It's everybody wants to help. When you're a veteran and you go up to the Hill with a bunch of other veterans, and we've made multiple trips up there, they'll dive over their desk to shake your hand, and they'll thank you for your service, and they'll thank you for all the good things you're doing for fellow veterans. But I have not seen any fight in the Hill since the early years that I started working medals and awards. And that was because of one particular aide within Senator Bill Nelson's office. We got lucky. We had a fighter in that. And that was one of the main reasons that we were able to get so many medals and awards through. It wasn't this 6-week process of send out a letter and wait for that response, which is usually a rubber stamp response. No, when we were dealing with that office, they would call them up that day, right then, right there, and get answers. And if we had something that needed to be addressed or answered, we could generally do it within the day. And that really expedited the system. But now I'm not seeing that kind of fight on the Hill. They'll send a letter, like I said, they'll send a letter, take 6 weeks back and forth. But that's time that we do not have with Colonel Davis. And it is ridiculous that we have to continue going through the congressional liaison. They will not call up the person directly, the person in OSD, the person in SecArm, and get to the bottom of the problem. That has been the biggest difference I've seen from the early years I started working medals and awards to now. And one of the other things that I noticed when I was originally working medals and awards were, these are national awards. This is the United States Army or Air Force or Marines or whatever branch you are working with. And members of Congress would cross jurisdictional lines. They will not do that now. Getting help from a powerful member of Congress who might be on the Senate Armed Services Committee or the House Armed Services Committee, if you are not lucky enough to have them as your representative, they're not going to help you.
It's amazing. What is your group doing now to try to get this challenge resolved?
Well, for a very long time, we've gotten this packet to the door of the Secretary of Defense twice, 2 times. And with the help of people such as Jim Moriarty and his team, we found additional supporting information and eyewitnesses. We've raised awareness of the issue to the military, to major news networks, we've raised awareness that this is a 1965 Medal of Honor nomination for one of Special Forces' first African-American officers and one of its most decorated. We've raised awareness that Davis's 1965 Medal of Honor nomination was verifiably lost. That is a rarity. We can verify it was lost. And further, not acted upon.
It was lost twice, correct?
It was lost twice. The first time we verified it was lost in 1960, and that was in 65. In 1969, it was ordered to be recreated because they couldn't find the first one. And all records from that time period had been destroyed. It says that in the 1969 hearing into Davis's medals and awards. So that ends up including his commander, Billy Cole's testimony that, yes, I took that packet to Nha Trang. I took it to Special Forces headquarters. And it concluded that, yes, indeed, Colonel Davis had been put in for the Medal of Honor in 1965. And it concluded that a new substantive packet should be remade. That was either A, never done, or B, it was started. Who knows if it was completed and trashed as well.
Well, are you optimistic going forward?
I am. We've got a lot of good folks on our team that are fighters. We had a saying at one time many years ago, and not with Colonel Davis's case, but it was delay and deny and hope they die. And we are not going to let that happen. We're going to keep fighting no matter what. We're going to see this through. We're going to see Colonel Davis properly recognized with our nation's highest combat award, the Medal of Honor.
Well, Winston Churchill said, courage, determination, resolution.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you, sir.